Good evening, guys. It's Ken at Tortoise Capital with the Saturday night podcast for May 9th, 2020. So just a fun update. You saw yesterday, I was talking about at the start, reconnecting with Dr. David Boji. Yes, sir, I'm recording. Thanks, Eugene. So I sent him a note about some of the email exchanges that I talked about yesterday and just was connecting back with him. So he invited me and Van Miller to join this international circle of folks that are working on true storytelling. That's their website. He's partnered with a fellow narrative inquiry scholar from Denmark, and they've invited a select group of people to come in and chat it around. They're publishing a book in September on these techniques that they're applying that I've been following with interest from Dr. Boji over the years, and it'll be kind of fun. And I had to laugh. I sent him a edited copy of yesterday's presentation, the first 20 minutes or so, where I kind of walked through the seed that led to essentially joining this international conversation with some business leaders and other scholars and people trying to make a difference in the world. An international network working with storytelling and sustainability, an ethical approach to storytelling. So that should be a lot of fun. And we'll keep you posted. I think it'll be interesting. But once the story gets out, you release the dragon, who knows where it's going to go? So we're going to find out. I just have to pick something to bring in there as my biggest challenge that storytelling in an ethical way can address. I think I'm going to try to come up with a story that talks about trying to balance the technical skills that I'm trying to provide here, just, teach me to fish, versus the whole being a fisherman kind of thing. And I'm trying to figure out how to do that in an ethical, proper way, which is going to involve basically just being who I am and trusting people to find the value for them if it's there, and trust their judgment, but still be responsive to what the people are talking about. So there is some kind of, I'm envisioning this like negotiating space, at the boundary, and how you ethically make offers of what you propose is of value, like showing your wares. So I think there's some kind of marketplace of honorable ideas and a negotiation space and a social contract at a minimum between, buyers and sellers and buyers and people exchanging stories in that space. So that's what I'm going to explore with them and try to put a business context around that to see what I can see. So there we go. So here's today's agenda. We're going to start with a speed run. It's an interesting one. We're then going to go into the weekend report with the intention of finding candidates for swing trading, and then we're going to run through some flashcards where we just talk about some ideas that were on my mind. It started off with 1, it became 7. So what are you going to do? What I'd like you to do is, as we go through the speed run and then the weekend report, you've got some homework to do, and I want you to find 1 or 2 maximum symbols that you would like me to frame tomorrow and discuss those frames in the strategy session. So for this to be valuable, what you need to do is listen to the narration of the speed run and the weekend report and start making your list of things that you're interested in developing a plan for. and preparing for, and then deciding what to frame and why, and then post those symbols and those reasons into Campfire, and then prepare your trade frame, and then you are prepared to be an active listener to my trade frame narration tomorrow. And then what you should do is compare my frame with your frame and see what you can see. And if you have an accountability partner, share notes with your partner. Now, what this requires you to do is to use Campfire, and then to use it properly, you would do what you always do, and that's when you're walking into a new room. You introduce yourself, offer your trade frame and rationale, and then ask for feedback. Now, if you go to Campfire and say, I'd like to see a trade frame on EWZ, period, I mean, who's going to give you feedback on that? But if you signaled your interest in getting my take on a Brazil trade frame and you posted your trade frame on Brazil for the record, you would probably get feedback on that from folks in the room. And one of the ways that you can find a accountability partner is to demonstrate what you're bringing to the table. And that is, hey, I'm interested in Brazil. Here's my trade frame on it as I understand it now. Bow. Come at me, bro. And then on the basis of that kind of negotiation that could happen around a campfire, you may find kindred spirits who are interesting others, and then strike up a conversation and use that collaborative space in Campfire to begin this process of outreach and network collaboration, loosely coupled. And then you can take it as deep as you want to take. But I talked about, I think it was, may have been yesterday. Yeah, yesterday or day before, when we went through the bar by bar and then did the, revealing, the next bar and talking through what it is that we're seeing. If you are intrigued by the idea of 4 or 5 people getting together, each one preparing one lesson and then going round robin, or even taking turns presenting that week's lesson, at whatever sustainable level, like the Euros are doing. Well, one of the ways that you find those communities of practice and shared interest is by looking at the work that people are posting in Campfire. And that's how you build the collaboration body. I can, at times I will recommend, hey, A, talk to B and whatever, but the most reliable way to do that is to demonstrate your commitment to wanting to learn in that way. And then I trust you to make the choices with your time and effort. But that's what I would suggest. If you were my officers, I would order you to do it and make it part of your grade. So this is how we learn at the Command and General Staff College. This technique won an award for innovation this year, when we talked about that gradual release of responsibility and how to get active learning in small groups and peer-to-peer instruction with supervision. So it's not just turn people loose, but it is a structured approach to developing and internalizing skills. So there we are. So as we go through the speed run, as you hear ideas that look and sound and feel interesting to you, just make notes on your note sheet. And then at the end of the speed run, because we're going to look at 40 symbols and then go through the pages of the weekend report, you're going to have some number of symbols. And then make your list, check it twice, pick a couple that you're interested in listening to me to frame tomorrow. Then if you post that information in Campfire, I'll collect those and I'll look for synergies, and the symbol that has the most votes, I will start with that one and work my way through the list. Okay, so that's the deal. If you're not registered at Campfire, I mean, I can help you with that. So, okay, here we go. Speed run. So I really end up liking this this little idea of making the orange circle to be that signal that I want to start a turbo core type of an approach where it could be a swing trade. There's reasons why it could, but I'm going to explicitly start it with a turbo trade. Then if it closes in the direction I like, we'll grow it into a swing trade. And so that's what I'm showing here with Alcoa. And the reason I like it is it's resting right along the PSAR, and I love the dragon. And we got 1, 2, 3 legs up, and now it failed to fail, closed through and held above the dragon, and we have recent evidence of really strong buying power within the last 10 days. So that ain't bad. And the fact that they closed it well, and the whole metals and mining and industrial section was doing fine, and down here in MACD histogram, MACD 4 seasons, I should say. You know, we are in. We've gone through winter, spring, summer, flirted with fall, and are poised for a summer expansion. So that feels really good. So I spent a little more time on Alcoa than I will on the others, just because it's very interesting. It doesn't have a signal on, if you look over on the TC2000, it doesn't show a daily signal. That's because it's right on the cusp between summer and fall, and so it doesn't tip one way or the other. It's too close to call, so we know. Okay. Upside targets on this one, if it broke out, I'd be looking at, it's already at the hump of the 10, so it's really Z1, Z2, or I'm sorry, Z2, Z3, as I look my way up. You know, this is one where essentially if we could buy it on the breakout, we're buying it essentially at the edge of the river, and then there's your 2R gains up to Z3, and then if you use something like either the bottom of the dragon would just be 1, the Bollinger Band would be Z0. So if you were using the yellow box as a risk with the PSAR, that's only half of a Z. So really all it has to do to justify the 2 to 1 is to get back to where it has been a couple days already. And that's really just a Z2 target. So that one looks pretty interesting. Now, the other thing I like about it is that the 30-period regression line has never come back into the river. So while this RL10 pulled back briefly, the RL30 is already outside the river. So this is legitimately a strong upward trend. And all we need to do to see the resumption of trending behavior is price in the RL10 to join the RL30 outside the river. So price is already outside the river. So if this takes off and starts going, you're going to see that RL10 leave the river pretty quickly. And then what do we have? The beginning of trending behavior. How far does this thing move in trends? Well, you can see the length of those moves from this 6 all the way up to the peak of about almost 8. So that was a 33% move, $2 on 6. And a pretty nice move here where it went from 7.25 to 9. That's $2 on 7.25. That's, I don't know, 20%. 30%. Yeah, it's 30%. So yeah, could this really be nice? Yeah, I like the fact that PSAR is rising, lower, the lows are higher, and it closed higher than it even got to on Thursday. So I'm talking myself right into Alcoa. I'm sort of giving you the trade frame already. Apple, we are long. Bring us over here a little bit so we can see. So we're long. The green dot, we're long from this green line. Had moved my stop Thursday to the Thursday's low. And my alert level is now going to be here. I really want to keep that one. What I don't show is the second position on it. We're already so high in this stack, I'm just going to let that thing ride. Amazon, turbo tomorrow. That's my box. Aussie dollar, we are long from here. And I'm going to move a stop. So this is where we had it on Thursday. It didn't challenge that, so I'm going to lock that in like right about there. So that's going to be from this this green line to here, so that's in pretty good shape. Boeing, let's get some perspective on this thing. I want to make it look better. So Thursday we had been short and then basically covered for a snack. Let's look at not quite an owl yet, but man, it's getting close, isn't it? Do we have a P1? No. So not an owl. Look at how narrow that those Z3 lines are pinching in, and it's in the bottom piece of the river, and it's had the last 10 days have been in the bottom half of the river. Hasn't really, it fell out of it a little bit, which was what got us short here. And we took a little snack and covered when it failed to fail further. This actually feels like a critical state. And I just changed my mind. This is buying on the button. Look how tight that doji is. And the dragon has curled up. Everything else about this is fine. What this is the absence of an unambiguous move. But the corresponding effect is that the lack of volatility is now starting to become noticeable. You can almost feel like time is starting to collapse in on this thing. And it's got to get to 150 to be the PSAR flip. So, here's the Bollinger Band mean. That's easily within reach. I would add a second position if it takes out the PSAR flip. Where would I go short on this one? I think if it breaks out below the dragon, I would even support you if you said the belly of the RL10 and the belly of the dragon as the signal. Yeah, I kind of like that one. This is about as compressed a little acorn as you could want, I think. Yeah, I'm talking myself right into Boeing. And I'm almost talking myself into a second position when it crosses the Bollinger Band mean. I think I just did. So I want to reinforce right away. That's my plan right there. Caterpillar. We are long one from the green line. Red line is our stop. That was basically a turbo, and we kept a piece, and so we end up getting a very small execution risk on this thing. Do I want to protect that? Like, would I scratch it if it just started failing tomorrow? Yeah, I think it would. Or Monday. Yeah, so I think I would be like right as low as I can be to not lose any money on that thing. I think that's the deal. And then I think we'll add here. Should have given you all the trade frames now, but you got to draw the pictures. That's what we got to do. And then if you ask me, then I'll cover it in more detail tomorrow. Now, when you're putting your trade frames together in your little trading plans, remember you got to take that flashcard with the the trade process and all those questions. You want to put together a plan of action that addresses all those. So we are long one in Cliff from the hybrid, the turbo, and I've got my stop right in here at fair value. I screwed up by not getting a second position in on this one, but I will add as soon as it breaks out and keeps going. Cisco, this is one where we were ready to do the hybrid turbo from Thursday. We were in here, and then we ended up getting a piece here on the turbo trade, and then added a position here when it broke out above the dragon, and then added a piece when it broke out above the PSAR. So we've got 3 swing positions in here. Those swing positions were paid for by that run all the way up, and now I just got to show where my my alert line is. I'm going to get that third position kind of in the money, but a fraction. So we're going to be like right above that. Give it maximum room. Okay. So in a perfect world, it gaps up, and then we're going to quickly accelerate intraday, and then I will look to. It's already in the floodplain. I would look to preserve the gains on that one. Okay, it's just good. Lumber. We got long on this one. This is one where we were going to turbo this one, and it gapped up and just continued to go. So we end up keeping a piece here, and the stop is there. And I am mindful that we are in bearish normal. Chevron just stalking. Dow 30 has come out of that long central corridor that we've been studying. It kind of voted out for the second time. The last time it couldn't really hold, came back, held the PSAR, even flipped the PSAR, but it didn't fail Friday. It peaked its way out, so cautiously optimistic. Devon Energy, we were prepared for turbo. We got that turbo by buying the breakout of the box with the stop just here. So we're long one. Just leave it. I'm setting up the turbo. I'm just going to call it the turbo from now. So we'll set up the turbo swing. With that box, I'll go in both directions on emerging markets. EFA, we set that turbo up Thursday. So what we ended up getting was, so you can see, end up buying the gap up. And I'm going to use the skin of the dragon as my risk, and we're going to try to get that up into here, and we will scratch it if it doesn't work. Japan, same thing. We're long one from that blue line. That was we bought the gap up. So this is the one where you'll notice we talked about the 2 dots of the PSAR. So this thing was showing potential to fail here, but then it held the doji. So we liked the doji, so we set it up as this orange potential turbo, and then it gapped out of the above the dragon into the floodplain, and then so we just bought that and then held. We're going to hold the stop right there. Mexico, same thing. Bought the blue line using the bottom of the yellow box, so that was the core turbo. Get that on the line so you can see them. And I'm going to use a 2-day low on this one. Brazil, we are short one still. I'm sorry, we're not short one. We were short one from here. Our alert was here. It gapped up, so we take this exit on Friday, so that should now be we are now flat. I thought I marked these up. Facebook, just watching and grinding my teeth, really. Watching that thing. God dang it. I don't even need an additional reason to hate Zuckerberg. And this is what hate will do to you. It makes you blind to proper action. So don't hate. Don't be a hater out there. Or if you do, just acknowledge it and move on. We are flat on Gilead. So we had been short from the red arrow, red line, and it gapped down, sold off, and started coming back up, and I just took it here instead of waiting for the blue line. So we're now flat. Google, another teeth grinder, also doing really well above its long-term fair value. God bless. Thursday, we set up the turbo here. It worked, so we are long from the open. And our stop is here. And this is, Home Depot. I'm just going to give it room to breathe. I like it. Russell, we are long one the same way. Set up the turbo on Thursday. And then Friday's price action by the open. Then as it moves in our favor, raise our stop from here to the low of the day. And then as it's closing well, I go ahead and move my my signal line up into there. So we're long one. Real estate. We were short from the red line. We had moved our alert to the blue line. It gapped up, so take about a 0.7 loss on this one. You can see our initial risk was the top of the dragon here. So instead of letting it come all the way up to that so I can follow my rules, we went ahead, and as soon as it gapped above the signal line, we get it there. Hey, I just saw an alert that said the sound was reestablished. Did we miss audio? It's still showing it's recording, so I'm going to assume not that we didn't miss any. And I'm going to have this all the recording will get posted later tonight anyway. So real estate, we are now flat. Yeah. So we ended up taking a 0.7 loss on this one when it gapped up against us. McDonald's, just we are flat. That feels pretty good, but there's other better ones that are already through the dragon. Yeah, the disruption on the audio might have just been a moment. So here's one that kind of got away. I'm really just studying Nucor. I haven't traded that one as much as like U.S. Steel and Alcoa. And it's just, I'm putting it, because I'm much more interested in U.S. Steel these days, I'm just putting this one kind of in as a reference. I'd rather own U.S. Steel. It's a little more volatile, plus it's cheaper. But this one actually looks pretty good, because you got that nice big long one leg, pause, two legs, pause, and it's already resumed, and the RL10 is rolling up. Man, that's a strong chart right there. All it's really got to do is get above that RL10, and that dude is off to the races. Holy smokes, look at that. Nucor Steel. Go. I'm going to digress and just compare it to U.S. Steel right now. U.S. Steel's even better, though. It's already above its RL10. So I like the Nucor Steel, but, man, look at U.S. Steel. That little dip in the RL10 was negligible, and it's already free and clear. And that line is better. It has an unbroken string of PSAR successes from the time when we were looking at this thing back when it was 5. Look at the history we have with this. Swing and capture. Swing, we got really paid well in here, but the swing didn't lose money. 3 scoops into a swing, a scratch, 2 scoops and a cover. This one and a beautiful cover, and still going. So we're getting major rewards on this one all the way up the stack. So that is to be preferred to Nucor. So I like comparing those two. And then let's, just while we're here, since we're already on that and we're building our little logic chain, you can see XLB, Basic Materials, is kind of right there too. So that's been a very good sector. I'm going to add an extra credit piece of homework to tomorrow, and that is just go ahead and try to construct your logic chain. To construct your market, sector, target, logic chain, extra credit. The extra credit you will earn is the only extra credit that matters, and that's in the opinion of your peers. You want them to think well of you. Okay. So that was Nucor. Clean energy. Dude, this thing just is refusing to lose. So we got long one here when it broke above the dragon with our initial risk down here at the skin of the dragon and the PSAR. That's this. And then Friday happened. We added a piece on the gap up and free and clear because it cleared the RL10. And then it hit our program second entry at the peak of the Z2. So now we got 3 positions in this rascal. And if anything, my alert signal is a little too low. So we have been able to stack the entries on this thing. That was me almost knocking coffee all over my keyboard again. Let's not do that. So that's a way to that's what I mean about scale. It started small. So if this thing had failed back here, um, when they fail, we're small, which is one position. But when it works big, we're large. And we're using that, stacking positions with markets money as a way to build into that, rewarding success. That seems to me to be a key and essential, um, purple belt skill. This is SCO, and we're just observing this thing. That whole gyrations in energy seems to be settling down and sideways, and it's right in the middle of its river. So we're just going to just continue to study that one. Boy, has that been some yin yang trading in energy right there? Jiminy Christmas! And then remember this day. Holy smokes! That was a whale of a day. That was the day we got paid all the way up into here with an entry here, and that was that hybrid frog, and off it went and kept most of it. So it just seems to have calmed down and has come all the way back to here. So if you look at this as sort of the real fair value of it, previous hump of the dragon, that's kind of where it is now. And in the meantime, it's gone big down, big up, big down. Oil, holy cow. Silver. This is one where Thursday I got long with the stop below the box there. Friday, we had put, when it opened well, I just ran my alert stop right up into here. And then intraday, that thing rose all the way up into here. And as it started coming back, I just decided I'm not going to hold it any further. So our long, which is the green dot from here, this is where we get flat, and a 2-day swing looks like about 1.5 R on the swing trade. So I like that one. I'm going to go jump down to Wheaton, because that's the other part of this pair, and that was basically the same thing that happened in Wheaton. But I want you to notice is we got two pieces in on this one. So we had one entry, two entries, and then it gapped up, couldn't make a new high, and then as it was coming down the stack, I just decided to cash it there, both positions, and now we are flat in Wheaton. So you can see Wheaton is a little more aggressive than silver. So let's go back to, this is Virgin Galactic, and so I'm going to pull this box away so we can uncover that price. This is just one I'm letting it just cook for a while and stay in intraday. I just feel pretty fortunate we got 4 shots into that one, and then cashed it at the Z2, and then yesterday's opened it here, ran down, ran up, ran back, and so that's a great intraday trade right now, but there's no directionality to that at all. So that to me is kind of strictly an intraday play. It's a high priority intraday play, as you know from watching the weekly trade or the intraday trades all week. But that's off limits for swing trading right now. Simon Property. We were too short and then covered on Thursday, and we were just stalking it, and I am continuing to stalk. Why is that strange? Okay, so here we are, just stalking. Treasuries. We had been long this one 1, 2, 3, and we had the blue line in to protect, and then it gapped down, so we exited at the gap down. So we kept, we got paid from the two good positions there. So flat treasuries. I like the fact that it's got higher lows, so I could be tempted on treasuries, you know. The dragon has come all the way down to the edge of the river. But if this 1, 2, 3 bottom can hold, which is where it held over here, that almost feels like a natural limit right there. So that bears watching. Maybe I'm not quite ready to turn it orange yet, but I could be persuaded. I hope somebody picks that one for tomorrow so I have to frame it. Let's see. This is Tesla. I'm just stalking that one. He just can't stay out of the news. Now he's threatening to move the business to Texas because he doesn't like California's restrictions on factory workers. So we may just pick up the whole shooting match and go to Texas. I mean, they're not making any money even, but he sure is moving things around with reputation. I have a psychological block against owning it long at this level. But man, that should have been an entry Friday. Man. This is me trying to be a better person, to get over my hate. There it is. Ugh. Twitter, just watching it go. We are flat, and it's working. It's only $30. Man, should have already been on this one. I actually like Jack Dorsey. So I guess it doesn't matter if I like him or hate him. I just don't. Maybe I'm worried about the cult of personality. I like he put up $1 billion of his $4 billion fortune with complete transparency on how he's going to use that to contribute to defeating the virus. And he's going to track that on a Google Documents public shared document, full disclosure. That's how you do it. Well done. We're going to skip the triple indexes. I'm ready on oil. It just gave a PSAR flip. So I'm now ready to go on this one. VIX, the volatility is declining, and that decay is very good for the long side. That's what Friday was. Friday was a vote to the up. Walmart, that was a scratch on Thursday, and I love how it's holding support here at 121. Yeah, for no other reason than I like them, and the pattern feels good. The last time it was in this region was way over here, and we got two sets of multiple swings in on the way up to the swing high here, and that move is still in place. So I kind of like that. Off we go. So that yellow box is my intended risk. Now, uh, here's the way that scenario could work. If it gaps up and then, sells off kind of quickly like a little morning hook, a positive gap with a morning hook, then I will be hybrid frogging into it turbo. And then if it closes well, I'll keep 1/5 of it, and I will use yesterday's low as the swing alert low. So that allows me to scale that swing trade with a pretty tight stop, but with money in hand right from the beginning. So that's like fire, aim, ready. Wheaton, we looked at win, missed it. I just can't believe that they're going to be good. So, man. I'm standing aside on that one. I just don't like it. U.S. Steel is good to go. Missed it on Friday. I'm going to reinforce that one. Should have had that. Doggone it. So we're going to play this. Materials we've seen, that's good to go. Missed it also. Energy, we had set that up as a turbo. We got the entry here. My initial risk was down here. My position sizing risk, because it was moving so well during the day, would be there. And I'm going to move my alert to there. Okay. Finance, just watching. Couldn't even get through the dragon. Tech. This is one where we were long one from here with our stop down here at the skin of the dragon. Skin of the dragon was the original stop. It gave us a doji on Thursday. It held. Friday, what we said was if it broke out above the height of that doji, we were going to add two. So where we ended up adding two was at the open. And then moved our signal stop. I'm going to move that up just to here. So now we got 3 in that one, and it's off and running, and feels pretty good. Now I don't feel so bad about missing Google and Amazon. Yes, I do. I still hate to waste feeling bad. XLV, sideways quiet channel. We were setting up the little breakout box. It never broke out, and it got even smaller. It got even smaller. How does that even happen? So here, and I can't go short them. They are my spirit animal. I'm going to commit right now to just buying the opening and wait 3 days. I think they're gonna go. Okay. See how that works. Yeah, Eugene, you may recognize that technique. You plant the flag and state your intentions. That's what that was. So this one was interesting. We talked about this on Friday, XOP, and I want to just reinforce that lesson that it had this beautiful long run, the best performing sector on an efficiency basis, and then pulled back like 3 days and then finished in this doji right smack in the middle of the dragon. And that felt like the end of that run. And I said if it broke down below here, we were going to go 3 positions short if it broke through, but it didn't. Instead, what it did was gapped up and closed strongly. And then you saw from yesterday's plan through yesterday's trade how nicely XOP paid off. So it wasn't this, it was the other one, and then we just traded it in the usual way. Okay, so this is one I think I got to go with. It's been so strong, it failed to fail, and it feels strong. So we're going to buy that right there. And that's the speed run. So should have a number of symbols that you might be interested in just from the condition and location. So if you remember the key learning phrases from yesterday, one of them was the frog champion, location, frog champion. So the things that are on this list are things that trend really well. And that's why I'm paying attention to their location, because I know that once they start moving, either intraday or on the daily chart, that they can really trend nicely, better than their peer groups. Okay, so next up is the weekend report. So that's the weekly and the daily. And in that daily report, you'll find a lot of the math already done for you for trade framing and whatnot. There's some reference data that's already in there as you're thinking about how to produce your trading plan. Okay, so that was our speed run. And now off to the weekend report. Okay, so I'm gonna read this one at my regular speed. I'm not gonna go through this in that slower, deliberate, educational version of it. This is just me narrating in the usual way as we go. Okay, so this is the weekend trading report for May 9th, 2020. Wash your hands. Bearish normal conditions, but I note that we are only 0.43 away from this becoming sideways. So it's worked off all the pain. On a 3, 10, and 30-day look back, the NDX reading is strongly overbought, and the 90 to 70 look back is in the upper half of the neutral. So a steadily improving market. That's reinforced by the risk Z, which did not collapse this week. So the risk on still in condition there. Lack of trend means that there's room for a trend to begin to develop. So if this is where it holds and goes, there's actually room for it now that it's taken this tactical pause of the last 10 days. You can see the that should read current holdings for May. I'm sorry. That should read May for the 3 portfolios, with the next reevaluation due 1 June. And then you can see the those are still the leading contenders as of Friday. So U.S. and tech dominating there, with a little bit of balancing exposure from treasuries. The Dow 30 leaders: Microsoft, Apple, Walmart, Johnson & Johnson, United Health. No surprises there. ETF2 is still at a theoretical exposure of 10% due to um, everything except US tech being under its 4-month moving average. So it's still being cautious. Risk Z at 2.10, you can see. Shifting now to the monthly health check. I've highlighted the yellow zone there as the width of the dragon, and we have just crawled our way back into the dragon this month and closing at the monthly high so far. So that's actually a vote of confidence. But you can see the three price levels, the belly of the dragon, the Bollinger Band mean, and then the monthly low, all being three warning shots. Any one of those three, and even the Z1, would protect you against the excesses of that rocket sled sell-off. So those I think are pretty solid monthly support levels. Targets to the upside, it would be the spine of the dragon at 300. That feels like a important psychological level. 310 is the skin of the dragon or the hump of the dragon as well. Z2 and the PSAR flip at 328. And then maximum previous excursion up here at 340, which is now a Z3. We are in it's gone summer, fall, brief summer, fall, and showing a little bit of strength at the bottom of that Red River. And it wouldn't take much for this just to become healthy again. It's got to get through 300, doesn't it? If it gets through 300, everybody will say that was that. Weekly basis, the same logic, a little more fidelity. The yellow zone is the width of the dragon. Price is above the dragon, pushing towards that 2-week high, which would be very favorable. Support levels are the skin of the dragon, Z-1, spine, southern skin of the dragon, Z2, PSAR flip in the RL10, Z3, and then maximum adverse excursion. Upside strength, if it can get through the 2-week high, then 300 is in range, and that's the Bollinger Band mean, back here at about 302. Then the RL90, then the long-term fair value at the weekly RL270. Z1, hump of the dragon, RL10 peak, all above there. Really, if it can get through 300, watch what happens to the news. Let's see. The daily, we talked about that extensively. ETF 13 and 22, mostly cash signals still. Nice rebound in the U.S. indexes, the speculative ones. So I just want you to notice MDY and IWM have been in the middle of the pack for performance longer term, but have really started to show the way. I think watching the Russell is the way to watch that. Looking for U.S. the safety of investing in the U.S. and that unlimited cash supply, but then picking the riskier of the indexes, Russell instead of the S&P. And remember, we have URTY to be able to play that to the upside, triple. The Qs were not bad at 4.4. The Dow only up 2.61. And the S&P in a third position here is just strongly leading the way compared to the rest of the world. Treasuries, residual strength is fading. ETF 22 We can look at the strength and energy is continuing to rebound. I think that's a pretty good trend that's going to continue. ETF 32, really the same kind of deal. The pain down here in Brazil, oh, just red everywhere. That's why it's still on my shopping list. Dow 30 leaders: Disney, Goldman, Home Depot. I like Nike there. That's been pretty strong. But really, if you could just pick one, I mean, wouldn't it be Apple? It's rebounded pretty nicely from being down 3.5% 3 months ago, over the last 3 months, and then has rebounded strongly, better than Microsoft's. Home Depot's is neck and neck with them, though. So it doesn't always have to be tech. Sector spiders, software, semis, innovative technology. That's going to be continued strength there in tech. So XLK, the Qs are a way to play that. Home builders still strike me as odd. That one's just hard to figure out. ETF Max, the volatility ETFs continue to give back much of their gains, but remember, if you were up 145% from 3 months ago, you might be willing to give it a 20% cushion. One way to interpret this chart right here, looking at that ETF Max, you notice, so this is sorted by that blended percentage. So all the things that have been crushing it for 3 to 6 months, you'll notice that very few of them were the 1 week leaders. And what that means is you can't just go to the top of this thing and just buy those. It's, in fact, everything that's in the yellow in 1 week and 1 month is below average performance for that whole stack of ETFs. And so this sort of confirms, this confirms that insight that is the shorter term outperformance predicts inverse performance when you're talking about 0 to 3 months. So that 3 month indicator, when you see something is already up 150%, is there anybody left to buy it? So there's some nuance to these different time frames. Shifting to the daily, yeah. No, they're not. Yeah, we're on the ETF regional now. So this is still 10% in the allocation model. Only tech is above its 4 month moving average. Weakness every other place. But then, second and third position taken by the US and then Japan. Healthcare and technology leading the way in the XL series. Gold still showing a strong hedging and defensive play position. We've already seen treasuries, though, start to give up their gains. The ETF2 database stack. I like XLK down here. Notice that's green and white in the strength and consistency. So we come up here and look at green and white. It was good. Now, I'm sorry. It was good. Now it's great. So the 10-week rating is 71 in the white, but the current strength is 73. So it's now joined the front of the pack. So it has accelerated to join the key leaders. Whereas things like treasuries, we've already seen that starting to lose some of its luster. So green and white is one of my favorite ways to start playing this. Liquidity, again, that's why we love XOP right there, 6.5% daily volatility and lots of liquidity. Brazil also 5.5% intraday volatility and lots of volume. I want to come back to this. Just look at IWM versus tech. IWM is 50% more volatile than tech, and tech is not that much more volatile than the S&P itself. What that mean? That wasn't the case 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. What that means is those top 5 symbols in the Nasdaq have become the S&P 500, and so it's kind of morphing into something that's very close to the S&P, whereas the Russell is genuinely differentiated by components and performance. So, I mean, instead of buying the Qs to get, more favorable volatility, just buy the leveraged S&P if you're going to do that. Okay. I changed the order in the weekend report so you could now, instead of going right to the daily, I just put the whole stack of the ETF2 symbols in there. So now you can see green, white, yellow, and red at a glance instead of waiting to the end of the report. That way there's a better transition to the day. So if you'll notice that the XLK is that green and white. Some other ones include information technology, healthcare spider, XLV is green and white, so that's pretty cool. If you look down in the stack, there's XLB is white and yellow, so 61 and 55. What that means is last week it was slightly below average, and this week it's slightly above average. So in other words, it's moved up in the pecking order. It's now gotten in front of the median, and that's like improvements, but it still has a lot more room to go. So you're getting it a little earlier in the life cycle. So I kind of look for things improving in that way. Back to the daily, we've seen all these charts before. Tactical summary. Look at all the stack of dojis. Let me let the screen catch up. Sorry. Okay, there we are on the Dow 30 tactical. Furthest column to the left, that stack of dojis, just as an indicative of how narrow the range was on Friday. Plenty of auto framers. If you want to take advantage of the ones that sold off the most, you'd be looking at Pfizer, Walmart, Johnson & Johnson. Microsoft is interesting. Now, Microsoft is, look at that. It had a 101. It actually broke out on the 10-day NDX and had a doji, but it was one of the underperformers on Friday. That's really just an anomaly. So that tells you how narrow the range was. There's no fear in Microsoft, and it was a relative strength leader. That would be a big candidate for longer term swing trading for me. I also like that Cisco turned in a day in the green, and we have a swing on that one, as you recall. Shifting to the ETF 30s, only one doji there, finance. Look at the bottom of the stack, energy, oil exploration, and oil were all big winners. Brazil, Latin America, those have been laggards and are just starting to show some recovery. So maybe this is a sea change, the end of the panic, and maybe that bottom is in. Big breakout in the Qs, looking at the 10-day and 1-month NDX. Also in XLK and Mexico all had that breakout. Mexico is going to be very good for that reason because it's bottomed out and is starting to recover. Fair weather ahead. First stack, those would be the things. If you're looking for continuation of relative strength to keep going, those are the ones that are the furthest out of their river on a z-score basis. So Home Depot at 1.53 is halfway to the edge of the floodplain. Column 2, or set 2, are the ones that are below their Bollinger Band mean. Only treasuries and oil are out of the river. The most expanded pinch boxes are the ones that have had the strongest directional trend. Metals and mining doing very well. And then the most compressed pinch boxes are the ones that are approaching super pinch status here pretty soon. And look at Microsoft and healthcare. We remarked at how compressed healthcare was. So that one is poised for a breakout. The auto framer, not going to read that to you, but those are the ones that test out well compared to location today, compared to the 10-day high, combined with a relatively narrow range to give you that favorable reward to risk. So Merck, Walmart, Brazil, and Mexico. Fractal framework, the top stack, that's deep value. So Brazil stands out to me. Coke and Boeing. Boeing. Bottom stack in the red are the maybe overheated relative strength leaders. There's Microsoft and U.S. Steel again. It doesn't mean that they're going to fail. It just means that those are really enjoying the run up. Daily squeezes is one that combines a large average range with a very tight compression on Friday. So it's like a 1-day compression spring ready to go. Microsoft and oil at the top of the list. Boeing is up there, Walmart. So think about when we were doing the speed run. That's sort of a way to get that visual cue to guard against just that one channel of information. These mathematical numbers go through all of those integrations and comparisons and then sort by the best reward to risk, sight unseen. So I really like this second point of view and perspective. Four Seasons, half of them are in the summer again. So this little rebound of the last couple of days has been favorably received. Mexico, metals and mining, Russell 2000, energy. And then in the symbols, U.S. Steel, Home Depot, Apple. That's all you need to know right there. Multi-time frame NDX is up next. Bright greens are the ones that broke out to the upside in that look back period. So Microsoft, Home Depot, and Apple. This thing writes itself. That little totem animal on the lower right, the coyote skulking along. Omnivore, clever. One of the few wild animals whose range is expanding. Market mosaic, I'm going to leave the rest of this, really, that's all now backup and support material. You can see the shape of the recovery there. The rebound in the terms of the slope stat. Look at that nice bracket that it's given us. And we've come back into something more like an orderly move. And that was accompanied by the steady decline in volatility. That's why that's an important chart. This thing just gives you what normal and what the extremes of panic in the streets could look like. All right, so that's everything I want to cover there. And reminder, tomorrow I'm going to frame the swing trades that are posted for advice or details in the campfire chat room. If nobody posts anything, I'm going to cover the 5 that I like. I'm just going to do it anyway. But you can bet it's going to be Microsoft, Home Depot, Apple, U.S. Steel, Brazil. No, I mean, you can count on that. So, post your trade frame and why in Campfire. That'll be your introduction if that's your first time. I'm going to encourage you to construct your market sector target logic chain if you know that technique. If not, look at the video. Then listen to mine tomorrow with your note sheets, compare frames, make notes to discuss with your partner. And that's how we use Campfire. Those of you that are in the sound of my voice that are in the hybrid trading workshop, you can also do that in the message boards inside Basecamp if you want to kind of stay focused with your student peers in that course. That's fine also. Okay. All right, I want to go through some flashcards. I was noodling around today. And this file is posted in the handout section for you. Okay, so we're about an hour and 20 minutes into the narrative. One of the things that you can check on as you're watching yourself is your mental focus in periods of intense concentration, which is kind of what trading is. How long can you listen to me drone on before you start noticing your attention dragging? What do you do to quickly re-energize? How do you get that done? That's all part of reestablishing the zero state. Time, will, pattern, and money. So, flashcards. VUCA is a term of art that we use in strategic planning, comes from the Army War College and has now infected the minds of strategic planners everywhere. It describes the nature of the world and why it's so hard to get anything done. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. 4 different, separate, powerful forces and conditions that create difficulties. When we think of volatility, what we're really looking at in the performance of those targets is the rate of change. How fast are they changing when they're changing? How often do these bouts of change happen? Is it every week it goes through a sudden change? Like, what's the heartbeat of it? That's what we mean by frequency. When it does go into one of those periods of change, what is the magnitude of change compared to normal? So that would be almost like the ATR, if you would. So the rate of change is kind of the duration of the change. Frequency is how often those episodes occur. Magnitude is the size of the mountain, the size of the volatility. And then we can look at the effects of these episodes of change in terms of what kind of feedback are they reinforcing or dampening? A reinforcing feedback is really dangerous because some becomes more, becomes a lot, and it amplifies. Dampening feedback waves are like waves in a pool. It's very in a pond that's very still. We throw in that volatility event in the form of a stone. The first wave is bigger, and then they get subsequently smaller. So the directionality of that feedback, of the multi-series, is it reinforcing? Meaning, are they getting larger in builds, or is it dampening? The reinforcing ones would be like that bridge that the harmonics got were synchronized such that the more it shook, the more it began to shake. It reinforced. So we can think of just volatility on its own as one of the forces or descriptions of change. Uncertainty, what we're talking about there in the mind of the decision maker is the percent of required knowledge that I think I know, and maybe that I actually. So I think I know a certain amount. How much is there an objective Martian came down and then said, well, no matter what he thinks he knows, here's how much he actually knows about what there is to know. The percent of required knowledge that you actually know. And that's influenced by the error rate. How much do you think you know that ain't so? So all of that comes into play when we try to make judgments about what we think our level of uncertainty is. We have feelings about it, and we may not be able to fully know that because of the cost of information or the volatility. But uncertainty really is just dealing with how much of what there is to know do I actually know, and at what degree of confidence. Complexity has to do with the nature of all of the actors and variables in that environment. So it's the number of independent variables. What is their scope? So how broadly do they affect that environment? So something like a tornado has an enormous scope. Something like a slippery spot on the ground has a limited scope. Magnitude is the power of it to change the environment. And then its connectedness. How many other variables is it connected with? And that gets back to volatility, the same idea of reinforcing versus dampening. If you have a lot of things connected to you and they all act to magnify the signal that you send, you can quickly get out of control. So that's what we think about complexity, is the mathematical combination of all the different states of all those variables and their power to affect change. And then finally, ambiguity has to deal with, when you have something that we could all agree is a fact, it's the number of equally supportable yet mutually exclusive scenarios that somebody would count that as evidence for. So let's say you had an opinion that said price is going to go up or it's going to go down. And price has now come into a doji. If you were of the opinion this thing could go up, then it going into a doji is actually evidence that it could do that. But it could also equally support a scenario where price goes down. So if you come across something and you declare it a fact and are convinced it's a fact, and yet it can support multiple mutually exclusive scenarios, it's really not helping you. It's making things more difficult because it doesn't rule one thing out or another. So each of these can be studied separately when you're trying to assess the situation in the market or the sector or the target or the time of day or in the opportunity or in a series of decisions over time, and you're looking at how a system performs. All four of these are lenses through which you can assess the environment and come to some conclusion about how prone is it to change from any or all or some combination of these forces at work. Okay, so that's what, when we talk about VUCA, that should be tattooed. So you say, oh yeah, every time that I think it's understandable, just put some VUCA on it because it's coming. Empty your bowl, open another one. So this is a technique I call layered brainstorming. I call it that because that was the term that I invented for it today. I've never heard it called that. I've never called it that before. But as I did it, it just suddenly kind of made sense. So after this is over, I'm going to go see if anybody has coined that term. And if not, I'm going to write a paper on it and get credit. try to make that bigger. There we go. So this is layered brainstorming, and you notice there's different styles of writing and different colors and different angles. And down here at the bottom, it says the order. So as I was getting ready to do this stream of consciousness and follow the thoughts, I started with the thick black ink, and then I went to the skinny black ink. Then I went to, that's the color blue, the blue ink, then the green ink, and then I ended up with purple. That color didn't come through very well. So I started off, I wanted to talk about this top level process of detect, decide, deliver, and assess. In a sense, that's the functional description of how we trade. We're scanning our sector, scanning the market, looking around for opportunities, trying to avoid problems. We're trying to detect what's going on. And then once we detect something, then we decide what we're going to do, even if it's nothing. So that decision is a cognitive process on the information that we've been collecting, that we've been trying to detect, and then we make a decision about what to do, and then maybe we have multiple choices and we decide which one to pick, or maybe we only have one thing to do and we either yes or no. But then once we've made our choice to act, or which choice to act upon, we then deliver that solution in an action. We take an affirmative action to do something. And then when it has run its course and it has generated results, we can then think about assessing not just the results, but all of the processes and functions that took place all along the way. So that represents one cycle of information collection, processing, decision making, acting, and evaluating or assessing. One complete cycle. Detect, decide, deliver, and assess. There's a decision that you make to move from one phase to another. And so you can now drill down into each of these pieces. So that's what I did with the thin black line. When I think about detection, and I'm trying to get better at that sub-process, I can think about things like this. What kinds of sensors am I using? What is their range and reliability? How accurate are they at detecting? Do I have redundancy? Do I need redundancy to make sure that those few signals that are occurring, those targets that come through, I want to make sure that I get multiple chances to see that good target. I don't want to miss them because my sensor wasn't perfect. So I may need redundancy, or maybe I need redundancy in order to confirm. And then those sensors come at a certain cost. The whole information collection subsystem comes at a cost. And then to what degree is it important that I verify that information at some cost? And then what's my error rate and the total cost of information as a sub-process? So those are the things that I can think about to try to just get better at detecting. All other things being equal, if I do a better job of detection, I'm going to improve the raw material on which I can decide. Having a professional language like we're developing gives us the ability to express that with clarity and some precision and robustness. Okay, so decision time. I can think about this in terms of the choices I have to choose from, the options I have to choose from, I should say it that way. What criteria I'm using to make the choice, or to say when does a choice become activated as an option? Like, is it it has to be a certain reward to risk ratio before I can even choose to decide to take it? What's my process once I've gathered the required information and they drop it on my desk? How do I systematically process that in order to come to the decision? And what's the costs of making that decision? What are the direct costs, the indirect costs? And I'm going to put the consequences, I'm going to put the consequences of my decision, like how I made that decision could impose a cost long term on overall effectiveness. Like if I made a decision that hurt somebody's feelings because of the way I did it, not just what I chose, but in the way that I chose to make the decision. If I did that poorly, then I may be incurring a cost that I got to pay later to fix the consequences of what I just induced because of the way I chose to decide. And that becomes a deferred cost. How do I validate the decision? Do I need to? Do I need multiple independent affirmations that it's a good decision? Or is it a single, one man decide? Or is it a plurality or a majority? Is it a supermajority? How do I validate it? And what's the scope? How big is the decision? How long is it got to last for? And how far does it reach? What kind of style am I choosing for that particular decision? And does that vary based on the nature of the environment? That's where that Vent and Vroom model that's in one of the lessons talks about. Well, once I've made my choice and I'm going to deliver, I can think about my delivery system, its reliability, accuracy, range, effectiveness, collateral damage that it causes, its efficiency, error rates, and all that. The usual things that we might use, system quality number and error rates, to evaluate how well we delivered. And then the assessment. When I'm evaluating this cycle, but also as this cycle as part of a larger cycle and looking at the whole histogram, is my assessment process systematic, complete? Does it go deep enough? Are there multiple perspectives reflected? Are there known standards, objective, that are clear and properly applied with a calibrated instrument? Does this assessment feed forward to changes in behavior, or is it just marking time? Is it action oriented? Does it drive me towards a decision? In other words, does it help me detect a need for change and point the way? That would be useful. What's the cost of making the assessment? What are the consequences of how I assessed and how I choose? And what are the incentives that I built in there to conduct the assessment, even if it reveals things about myself that I don't like? Oh, warts and all. I got to have some way to put some positive incentives in there to make all this stuff happen. So that's the detailed layer. If the detect, decide, deliver, and assess is the central layer, the detailed layer would be those thin black lines. I then went to the blue words in the lower left corner and upper right hand corner, and I started thinking about, the next higher level of detect, decide, deliver, assess, simply as one of the processes that are out there. And I could think about, how long does it take me to go through all of those? And what's the overall cost of all of the ways that I'm doing things? And how are they allocated? And then, is that worth doing? What's the boundaries that I go to when I'm conducting those assessments? Or do I do that on everything, or just the biggest decisions? Or what are my boundaries? And then the simultaneity. How many cycles like that can I manage at one time? Span of control. Can I be in different phases on different trades? Like detecting one thing while I'm delivering on another, while on the third set I'm trying to decide which one to trade. And then on the fourth one, I'm trying to get back into the zero state when I exited that other trade for bad reasons, and now I get this emotional content to deal with. Can I exist in multiple modes at once? What's my span of control given the nature of that? And then how do I think about signal and noise as part of an information processing? Since I'm never going to be 100% signal, it can cost too much. How do I build in a respect for VUCA as part of that? So those are some of the theoretical constraints about that process, and I can do that about any process at this higher echelon of layers. Upper right-hand corner in the blue, I start thinking about system characteristics and other system pieces like scale and speed. If I do really good at something, can I do a lot more of it? Like if I discover an improvement in one pilot program, how can I quickly bring that to bear on everything that I do? And how fast can I scale? You might think of an example there of how do I get that second and third positions in and focus on this and drop the other ones off fast. That's what I mean with scaling, and how fast can I do that? Meta reliability, where I can now think about something like I might be really good at detect, decide, horrible at delivery, and pretty good at assessment. Well, there's some error factor where I'm less than perfect in all those, and it nets out to some kind of overall grand system reliability rating. That's what I think of as meta reliability, the top line efficiency. Thinking about supply chains is a very powerful way to put a business like overlay theory on this. And so I'm an expert in supply chain management and design. And so I try to bring those sensibilities into my own supply chain about producing decisions to trade. I can think about all of these in terms through an economic lens and use incentive theory to try to reward the things I want to emphasize. So I can use that in psychological terms to shape my decision making. And to what extent are all my processes lean and agile, since we've got to be adaptive in this world? So those were some of that next higher level of, first order higher level. I then went to the green, and because I was thinking about things in terms of business style solutions, I think about, bottom line, value creation and value add. Value creation where you're making something out of nothing, value add where you're contributing to processes. And I hope that I'm doing that for you, and I take your attention in our engagements as as inputs and influence on my opinion. But those really are driving me to think about how can I create value and in the world and for you and for me, and then how can I add value where there's already value being created so I can support. So that's the almost at the values level on that green layer. So that's a fourth layer in this brainstorming. And then at the very top level, the meta level in purple, I said, oh, look at all the different layers in here, each one resting on the other in some hierarchy. That feels like an onion scale. Oh, let me call that layered brainstorming. So I just labeled it layered brainstorming. Now I got to go check the literature to see if anybody else has used it before I claim it. And this is just one technique of mind mapping, almost like categorizations and a virtual hierarchy, but kind of nonlinear in some ways. And then the use of the color codes and the angles allow a little bit of separation and creates it feels proper to me. So layered brainstorming is a technique as a way to teach the central idea of detect, decide, deliver, and assess. And each one of those is a lens, and each of the subcomponents is a microscope that you can use to start examining your own systematic processes. This is part of systems thinking. And systems thinking is multi-echelon and simultaneous, and builds on subsystems and adds to metasystems. And this is an example of that kind of thinking. When I talk to my officers, I try to give them a better chart than this. What the heck? Oh, there we go. Good. Fifth page. So I develop organizational leaders for the Army and Department of Defense. And these are guys that are learning how to run large systems. They have been tactical leaders where they have been personally leading people through and leading by example. And they have to transition to a world in which they are now designing, managing, improving, costing um, systems to run large organizations. And so they have to learn a whole new set of cognitive skills and habits of mind and all that. And so as they get deep into the technical pieces, much in the same way you guys are trying to make sense out of this pile of ideas I shovel at you, you know, and try to incorporate it into your trading. Sometimes getting lost in the forest for the trees and all that. And as an action-oriented decision maker, a fireman, an executive officer, the guy who runs things, was always my strength. I was a pretty good commander, and that's a feeling that you get because there's more intangibles there. All the things that matter are intangible and immeasurable with calipers, but it's in the hearts and minds of the people that you work with. But management, I excelled at. And this is the approach that I took, that there are only three kinds of problems: skill problems, will problems, and lack of imagination. And you may say, well, wait a minute, what if I don't have the resources? Let me tell you, and when I talk to the Department of Defense officers, I say, look, we got a $750 billion budget in the Department of Defense. That's an abomination, but it's also a fact. And I said, if you're in the Department of Defense, you do not have a resource constraint. If you don't have the money in your budget for your organization, all you have is a imagination problem, like you don't know where to go to look for it, or you don't know how to get it, skill, or you're not willing to go do the work that it takes. You don't have the will to go fight for the budget for the thing that you may or may not believe in. So there's no lack of resources in Department of Defense, in the Army, for crying out loud. If you live in America, there is no shortage of resources for anything you got to do. I don't know how far that generalizes into the world of spirit and activity and all that other stuff, but I look around at a world and a universe of abundance. I do not see a lack of resources in the world. And so for me, when I hear I don't have the resources, I don't mean to say that in a sniveling tone, but when I hear a sad voice cry out in the wilderness, I lack the resources, it just seems to me that that becomes some combination of a skill problem, a will problem, or a lack of imagination. And I act on the basis of it. Oh, there's resources. We just got to find them and get them and use them. Let's go. So I'm just going to talk about skill, will, and imagination problems. Each one of those problems has a correct response. And so when you diagnose something as a skill problem, that chooses the correct response. And that's training and leadership. Skill. Everything we do is teachable. So we just got to have the skill. But if a guy is capable of learning but won't, he refuses to learn, or he pretends that he can't learn, he just doesn't, or he knows but won't do it, that's a will problem. So when you're working with folks to develop them to be all they can be, it's important to make that distinction: skill problem or will. And sometimes that skill it could be a social skill. The guy just doesn't get along with others. He just doesn't know how. Not a good team player. And it's not for lack of trying. He just doesn't know those kinds of skills. He was, he was raised by wolves or something. Although if you're raised by wolves, you're probably pretty social with wolves, but maybe not with people. So skill and a will problem. Now the third one, though, the imagination, is one where I see that more with organizational leaders than I do individuals, because on practical, direct action, immediate action solutions for problems, the human brain is optimized for creative solutions out of desperation or imagination in the physical world. So our brain seems to be able to pop like popcorn when it comes to finding those kinds of things, and we have more or less big helpings of imagination. But on more challenging things than complex problems that are influenced by VUCA, where our intuitions are not well grounded, we may actually have the skills that are needed, but we don't see how that skill can be transformed into action in this other domain. We don't know how to cross domain, even though we have the will. And so sometimes it's just a spark to show guys that they actually have the skills to get it done. Or I don't see how I could do it. Or I don't know how I could generate the popular will to get this thing done if it takes a whole team to do it. So a lot of times imagination becomes a kind of a problem when you get into a certain degree of complexity or chaos. All the other things may be there, but lack of imagination. So sometimes all you need is that connector, that spark. And so the collaborative learning teams are ways that people can see you and your skills in your environment from a different angle, and they may see a connection that you can't see because you're inside your own head and you have your one point of view. So one of the elements of critical thinking is to learn how to acquire the skill to look at things from different perspectives in a systematic way. De Bono's 6 hats model, for example, is a structured approach to how to think systematically in a way that generates creativity and imagination. That actually sounds like a good flashcard for tomorrow. This is De Bono. The De Bono 6 hats technique, right? So once you've diagnosed, or if I may say, detect and decide what kind of a problem you have, it kind of already chooses the correct response, and then you may have a couple different ways to fix a skill problem, a couple different ways to fix a will problem, ways to generate imaginative solutions, all that. I want to just reinforce, though, you have enough resources. You have enough skill, will, and imagination and resources for any problem. And the way I've drawn that, what's the problem? What's the fact that you can even say it and you can frame the question in your head means you've already started solutioning. You've gotten past that inarticulate being frozen by the situation, that you've started to add cognition and framing to it by saying, what's the problem? You've initiated the solution. So the problem is already beginning to diminish into the distance and is being replaced by that green dot. Let's go. Let's apply our skill and will and imagination and good, reliable processes to get going. Let's march. In fact, you got a problem? We're going to eat the problem. The problem. Eat it. So that little framing is a verbal audio reinforcement I use with my soccer teams. When I'm trying to get their mind right as young kids and teenagers and high schoolers that are dealing with tremendous waves of change at that time in their life, in every aspect of their life. And so giving them the mental strength and fortitude and internal self-talking processes to help them deal with stressors, that's how we build mentally strong soccer players, teammates, citizens, students. And so we have this little ritual. It's just funny. I start with a phrase, and then they restate it back to me. So I will say, eat the problem. And then they will pause and say, the problem, pause, eat it. So like if we set up some dribbling cones, like little fire marker cones, and they have to, in some pattern, they have to dribble in and out of that like a little ladder or a zigzag. If they touch the cone, I will say, "Don't touch my cones." And then they're supposed to say, because they recognize that tone of voice, they know they're supposed to say, "The cones," pause, "don't touch them." And so that becomes a way to immediately connect brain to brain at the values and process level, the trigger. So while they're doing complex physical activities and individually in small groups at a fast rate, and they're trying to learn these things, and I call out one of those things, they're supposed to be able to instantly detect with their ears the trigger and immediately trust and respond as one, as a team. And if they don't get it, we do it again until the whole team does it. So it gets them conditioned to use all their senses to know what's going on and then immediately figure out what to do and say while their feet are doing the other things. So they don't stop dribbling and passing and running. They just have to learn how to fully integrate all those functions. So if I say, "Eat the problem," they say, "The problem, eat it." So those kinds of little rituals overtrained become ways to rapidly trigger. And that is powerful for me as a auditory learner. And the same thing can be done in the kinesthetic and the visual, like the flashcards. You just see the image, you immediately know what to do and trigger the response. Or if you're kinesthetic, like if I rub my left palm when it's itchy, it allows me to instantly get into the zero state because I have a scar there from a childhood accident. So let's go is my daughter Rachel slaps her thigh on the tennis court when she needs to reset after the last point and let it go and play the next point, play the game going forward. She has this ritual. She basically hypnotized herself in a positive psychology way to in between points in order to quickly reset and stay in the match and not lose any energy through overthinking. Slaps her thigh and says, "Let's go. Let's go. March." March is that military term we're using. That's the command of execution. Forward, march. March is we're conditioned to go. So that becomes a power word for me because it's connected at a very root level to me. So one of the ways you can use flashcards and auditory and kinesthetic triggers is to do emotional state management in a way that resonates deeply with you. So 3 kinds of problems: skill, will, and imagination. No such thing as a resource shortage. You have enough skill, will, and imagination and resources to solve any problem. And it starts with, what's the problem? Let's go. Eat the problem. The problem. Eat it. March. This is the first one I drew today. It's powerful for me, right? Cross the line today. Today, I crossed the line. And here's what I mean. The line from the left-hand side where it's just thinking about stuff and then deciding to go. Let's go. You made a decision to go, right? So when you make that decision and you commit to action, lock it in. Let's go. Let's go make bank. This is a day to make bank. Make bank today. You could even ask yourself, make bank? And then that's a decision, yes or no. That little diamond is a decision symbol. Did you make bank today? If yes, green dot, good. If not, red dot, bad. Why are we making a bank? What's the point of making bank? Well, there's reasons. And when you think at the end of the day, did I make bank today? Yes or no? Remember, you're coming to a Y in the road, and that's tricky. Why am I making bank? And then if you turn it on its side, that Y, it's a yes or no. It's yes or no, I made bank or I didn't. So let's make a decision today to cross the line and decide to get it done. So when you've learned things, I'll go back to that kata slide we did before, where you start moving. I'm unaware, then kind of aware and familiar, and I sort of get it, and then boom, got it. You've locked it in. You made a decision that you are comfortable with your level of knowledge and that you got it. There's a feeling that it's locked in. It's set. So you learn something. And then you could learn it at the cognitive level, that L, or learn it to the point where it's even better, where you can apply it and you practice it, mean you're doing it reliably, routinely, and then you're just living it because it's part of who you are. So if you want to be the return on your investment from learning, you've got to lock that learning in, not just with your head, but with the 5 ways of learning, you know, your head, your eyes, your heart, your hands, and your feet. You got to know it in your head. You got to feel it in your heart because it's connected to who you are and what you mean. You got to feel it in your gut so that you can deal with the uncertainty of maybe, what if I'm wrong? What other people say? You got to know it in your gut to the level where, dude, I got it. I'm over the butterflies, not stopping me. I'm locking it in and going. And then in your hands, you have to have the craft knowledge that allows you to apply it. And then in your feet, so that you can walk it and live it every day on a journey, unconscious competence and getting it done. That's how you become the ROI of your own investment in learning. And then you either did or you didn't, green dot or red dot. And so every day, did I make bank or I didn't make bank? Hey, make bank daily. Then there is this inertia that is just gaining on you. There's costs of living and all that other stuff, and inertia is relentless. It just keeps marching along. So you've got to make bank daily. And then that difference between red and green, that little histogram, is it getting better or worse? Let's go. That's the same way that we're tracking Risk Z and MACD histogram and the 4 seasons. And those 4 seasons apply to everything. So if you were in the spring and it comes to that 0 line and you're about to get into the summer, you know what that means. And see 1 leg and plan for 2 and hope for 3, and it gets to some peak moment. How do I lock in those gains that I made in the summer while attending to the right strategies when I'm in the fall? And if it comes back to the 0 line and there's a decision point, is this going to go summer, fall, summer? If so, all systems go. Let's go. This is an auto long. Let's go. That's what that cycle looked like. But if it crosses through that 0 line and it goes into the winter, that change of scenery and climate and season is significant until it gets to some peak winter. And then that spring starts again. Think about where we were 40 days ago when we made the call about could actually be a turning point. On the second day after that, we were already starting to increment and act in that way. So that's the scoreboard of how you're doing on making bank, whether that's dollars or R or emotional bank account or proficiency or skills or willpower or imagination, whatever it is that you are committing to cross the line today to get better. Cross the line today. Today, I crossed the line. This is a day to make bank. Let's go. Make bank today. Why did you make bank? Because I came to a Y in the road and I decided to make bank. Let's go. So then ask yourself every day, how many decisions did I make today? And when I made those decisions, was it from a strong place? How assess those decisions? And then what were the results? And that's your scoreboard. And where am I in my scoreboard? What is my portfolio curve on whatever it is that I'm measuring? And my 30-day trend line, or my 30-period trend line, or my 30-iteration trend line, whatever those sets are, the 30-period trend line with the slope of the regression line of that 30-period performance is the health of your system. The slope stat, RL30, is the best single indicator I have for measuring anything and what season I'm in and all that stuff. that MACD histogram model of thinking keeps you locked in, and then you can come back to every decision, every standard. Did I meet the standard that I set for myself today? Yes or no? It's red dot or green dot. If it's a red dot, you know what you got to do. If it's a green dot, you know what you got to do. And you know if you were a red dot or a green dot today. You don't need anybody else telling you that. But it actually helps if you've got accountability partners as a way to lock in the truth, which will set you free. And then we just got to keep getting up every time we fall. Did you get up? Green dot. Did you not get up? Well, when are you going to get up? You're either going to get up or you're just going to lay there forever. So why not today? Let today be the day you cross the line. You know what to do. You already have enough skill, will, resources, and imagination. Will you do it? Let's go. I was reminded of basic training 40 years ago, and drill sergeants leading physical training just to get guys better and stronger each day. And we would announce the next exercise, and they would say in their drill sergeant voice, the push-up, a 4-count exercise done at a moderate cadence. I will count the cadence. You will count the repetition. So he would count 1, 2, 3, and then we would count 1. Or say it was jumping jack. 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 2. So he was counting the cadence at which the system would be performed. So we were all in there together, and you could hear everybody in time and working together, and you get that sense of us getting stronger every day in every way, each of us contributing, driven by that metronome of reliability. So what's your metronome? What is your pulse? How you keep and score? And then count the repetitions. And then he would say, note the rising inflection of my voice to indicate the last repetition. So we never knew how many we were going to do. And we were conditioned to the point, well, we're just going to keep doing them and counting them. And then if you couldn't do anymore, there was something you were going to do in a rest position that was approved until you could do them again and pick it back up. And so if we were just moving along with push-ups or jumping jacks or whatever it might be, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2. And then in the last one, if we were going to do 20, he would do 1, 2, 3, 19, 1, 2, 3. And then that would be the signal that we would say halt instead of counting that last repetition. So we were having to stay tuned in to that leader's voice and work to the metronome, that reliable standard we could trust, that we were going to get stronger. So I would ask you, how have you established a metronome of reliability and regularity and trust and confidence in a simple process that is low cost for you to get it done? Maybe it's the weekly accountability call with your partners, and that just makes it easier to just do what you know you're going to do, and you do it for them because that's a carrot for you, that sense of positive feeling and commitment to others. So you do things for them that you might take a shortcut for yourself. So this comes back to that whole idea of decide to act for the record, treat each one real, don't do useless things, do not engage in useless activities. If you're going to paper trade, you better treat it with the same respect as you would a live trade. But if you don't, you're not just wasting time. You are actively sowing the seeds for later destruction. So whatever method you're using to get skin in the game and repeat the conditions and training that you do when you're fighting for your life, then you better do that. And you already know if you are or aren't. So do that. Don't take on more risk than you have to. If it means trading one share live, okay, one share live, do it. Scoreboard. That's how you know. I was reminded today that the strongest doesn't always win, but adaptability wins. This is slightly different when you're thinking about a species and an individual. You know, the way you would bet is, on an individual transaction, strength matters. mass matters. Over long periods of time and many opportunities to learn, the more iterations there are, the more adaptability becomes important. Because if it turns out that the trend line rewards strength, you can adapt and become stronger. But sometimes you need flexibility and reaction time, not strength. So on any individual transaction, adaptability is kind of, well, we're going to be adaptable after this but we got to survive this transaction. So that gets to the whole idea of risk management and asset allocation and how much risk you take on any given trade, because there it comes down to yes or no. It's binary, yes or no. What was my score? Then adaptability is the ability to use that as a learning moment. And then if you can outlearn the other guy, then you're more adaptable. I'm reminded that times have changed. Oh, yeah, they're always changing. Yes. What worked then may not work now or in the future. No kidding. Time will tell. And ask yourself, will you wait and see what happens? So if you got something that's working, well, you just got to wait and see what happens until it doesn't work. What else could you do? So this gets us to those two basic strategies in business or anything, exploitation and experimentation. When you have things that are working relatively, how do you exploit the advantage for however long you have that advantage? And when do you know, according to the scoreboard, that you're gaining or losing on that relative advantage? So the idea of relative strength. And then experimentation is it's a cost that you invest up front to deal with the uncertainty, to see if you can find other things that may be better, that could be better, that in the future might be better, and evaluate it as a choice developing options. And then the asset allocation decision to decide how much do you spend on improving of systems that are going to exploit, and then systems that are going to experiment, and then how much do you spend on improving those existing processes? Because you can improve the way you exploit. You can actually experiment in order to improve the exploitation. You can experiment on how to improve your experimentation. You can be better at exploiting your experiment. So this thing goes round and around. But things come down to those two kinds of tools. What am I doing? Am I exploiting an advantage that I have? Or am I exploring or experimenting to test? Exploring is the precursor of experimentation, and exploration is to just discover something that's worth experimenting on. Am I exploring deeply enough and broadly? Experimenting, I already have something that I have a hypothesis about why it might work. It's already kind of like a second order. I explore in order to experiment. I might even have to imagine before I explore, before I experiment, and then I prototype, and then I limited rate production. So I can go up the scales of how I turn things from initial curiosity into a world of exploitation. Asset allocation decisions, risk management, and assessment is all part of this. The cost of capital all go into creating those kinds of businesses. In some ways, if you look at the way I try to trade and the way I try to think about things, I know it takes time to go from a seed to harvest time. And so you'll see me, I try to get things where I start them in different planting seasons, and they might have different time frames for growing to maturity. And so this way I'm kind of diversifying from the start point, and I'm diversifying in terms of length of growing season. And then if these things grow and I'm successful, then I should be getting some kind of return on investment at some pulse rate. And some of that stuff goes into increasing my seeds. So what I'm really trying to do is grow my bag of seeds in quantity and diversity, and exploring different ways to apply this approach to reaping and sowing, sowing and reaping, that sort of agricultural return on investment. No different than investing in day trading, swing trading, position trading, and traversing those time frames, as opposed to making all or nothing bets on one time, putting it all on the roll of one dice. I don't like that. My advantage is in gaining incremental advantage on as many opportunities as I can properly and professionally frame, and then spread my risk, and then achieve the expectancy of the system. And that gets up to the idea that started this flashcard: strongest doesn't always win. Adaptability over the long run wins for the species and if the individual, if you can stay in the game long enough. So that's a dialogue on risk management in some ways. Some systems thinking about the process of decisions and then how you support the making of decisions. So the environment E is generating an infinite number of opportunities, and we got to decide which ones we want to take, which ones cross the line because we framed it out and we've looked at the game, potential goals and rewards, and we've considered the risk that comes out of VUCA. We've identified a 1R manageable risk and then a reasonable entry, and we've put in a line here that we've said, if I see this much adverse retracement, then I'm going to get out of this because the hypothesis is that's not working. That's not going to be the one that goes to the goal. And I put that execution decision somewhere so that when you take up all of the other risks and VUCA and uncertainty and slippage and whatever it is, I like that to be at about 0.3 or 0.2 of a loss compared to my position sizing loss, which is like a 1R. I managed to the 1R standard. Don't take losses greater than 1R. I don't even like getting close to that. When I'm like at 0.2 and 0.3 right after my entry and it's going that way, dude, that's not the kind of thing that goes to my goal. In fact, the ones that get to my goals fastest from a critical state are the ones where we get into it and then within 3, 5, 10 bars, that thing is going. And then my fireman can make the decision to get us to no lose plus dinner for 2 and locks it in. Boom. Whew. Now I can just hand it to the manager until it gets up there past an average win or beyond 1R or 2R battle drill. You draw the line. When do I apply expert exploitation? Expert exploitation means I'm bringing my A game to the management of that trade because this is a payoff. And I might get rid of some of the other trades so that I don't get distracted or diverted or diluted. Where's the line where I draw, man? And I'll tell you that all of those lines are part of the way you construct the frame from when you decide to get onto the playing field and go to the goal line and go shoot and score. So we can think about how we do all of those things. Let's rotate 90 degrees there and start thinking about how over time we're going to gain results from the way we've constructed our game plan and execution: decide, detect, deliver, assess. And then we can learn from that if we will, and if we know how to learn, and then learn properly from the large data sets to get better and adapt towards better achievement of our goals. And to the extent that we have systems, we'll do better at that. And the characteristics of those systems from Systems Thinking 101, they're simple, safe, built on standards. They're sustainable over time in terms of the cost of running them and all that. They are systematic in that even the components minimize discretion, that there are subroutines and processes and measurements. That's what I mean by a systematic system is one that is also, the components are systematic. Like I could have a system of consulting the astrological signs. That's my system. That's not systematic. And then those systems require support, and they can generate support too. So all of those S words are the things that we can use to think about how to improve our systems. And then our evaluation criteria, at the end of the day, we can use those R words and say, is that system reliable compared to where it was or compared to other alternatives? And what's the trend? Is it getting more reliable? Is it repeatable? Is it robust to many different environmental conditions or to risk, to VUCA? Is it, does it have a reference? Is it documented that I can study and have somebody else help me in other? So is it referenced? And is it rolling? Is it going? Is it being used? Are we applying power to the wheels and getting it going? So when you think about the decisions that you have to make, those are the decisions you have to make on any trade frame, and how to frame it, and then how to do it, and then the criteria to cross those lines. And then you made a decision to score it and learn from those results. And you have systems in place to do all of those things. And you have evaluation criteria to see if you're getting better at doing those things. And that's how you move towards your goal. Remembering that we live in a world of tigers, in a world of VUCA. And the power of that 1R management standard. And I'll just tell you, I like having a lot of insurance about not taking more than one. Like, I don't like to go to, maybe if I get, it's at 0.99R and I still get 0.01 to, really? Really? The cost of the emotional behaviors to exist in that environment. Oh my God. So if it ain't working for me, get out. Get back in. Okay, easy. 0.2s and 0.3s, and then the big payoffs when these things work. And now we can look at the reliability and frequency and scoreboard decisions and decision support in a systematic way. I was trying to think about how, from that one flashcard about value add and value creation and value add. So I was just trying to document what I think I can offer you, or what I'm trying to do for you is these chunks. I'm doing market analysis. I'm identifying opportunities, how to detect them, how to frame, how to verify in core, swing, and day trade timeframes. I'm giving you a sense-making model about how to interpret and apply and do all that. And they tend to be holistic in the sense that they are triggered by environmental cues, the E at the boundary. I try to integrate that sense-making model so that as those triggers come in, that they start falling into these buckets. I'm trying to teach what I know. I'm trying to teach you what I know about learning and teach you what I know about teaching so that you can be a good student, so that you can be a good teacher, because to be a good teacher is to be a good student, and a good student aspires to be a good learner and tries to adopt the elements of teaching in order to teach peers. I am trying to add value through demonstrating and teaching applied practical trading. Results are daily, weekly, monthly. Get it done with efficiency and effectiveness, focusing on results, leveraging trends. And we can think about those in terms of over periods of time, at what rate, what's the volatility of our equity curve, what's the stability of results, all of the things that you were doing to evaluate price in a channel and a trend for a target. You can apply all of those management principles to your own equity curve and put that into a MACD 4 seasons and a slope of the 30-period regression line and the Z-scores to evaluate your own meta performance in the same way that you evaluate markets and opportunities and trades and timing and all that stuff. That applied practical trading has certain things that are in direct support of you, reports and language and trade frames and lessons and all that. General support, emotional support, coaching support, a learning environment, a community of practice in a protected space where collaborative learning is encouraged and documented, which creates a strong support base in our base camp and campfire and the learning management system. All of those things are tied together into that bucket that ties these, that generates this documented sense-making model and supports all of these other sub-functions in every time frame. And the elements of that sense-making model, which I'm trying to make holistic: strategies, systems, methods, components, tools, and bits or tips, starting from the broadest all the way down to the little components and tools to manipulate them and build them, and then the bits and how to apply them. So that's where I'm trying to create value and where I'm trying to add value to your own practices in those areas, and trying to put those into buckets and frames of reference so you can get what you need in an efficient way. And that's where I need help from you in the co-creation of what it is that you want, you need, that I can provide. So if the better you help me understand what I can do to help, the better I can try to do it. So we're trying to, that's the general sense of collaborative improvement all the way through. So those were today's flashcards. And the files there for you to consider. What I'm probably going to do with the, the hybrid frog guys, and anybody that, cares to, I would just say, if any of these little chunks, the lessons, the bits, the flashcards, whatever, are especially helpful, then that helps me, do better. So what I got the guys going through the documented lessons with the Cornell note sheets is I'm asking them to think about which chunks really resonate. And so maybe I said something, maybe, I've been lerping around here for, good Lord, 2.5 hours. I don't know how you guys put up with it. Maybe there was a 7-minute segment in there that just, that was it. That was the thing. When I learned from you that was the thing, I can crystallize that into a seed and make it its own thing and go back and pull it all out. Or I can put it in, I got the guys doing timelines of lessons so that we can build a timestamp for, hey, this hour-long lesson had these sections and these timestamps. So that's what they're trying to go through, these lessons at their pace and building out the timestamps and the time series and grading them so that we can make the Cornell note sheets indexed and evaluated through the eyes of others. And then it's not just me, hey, I think this is really good, but you can see from the community of practice and then get best use of your time. So to the extent that you're doing that, then that's a way that you can leverage what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to build out the infrastructure of this to get it going. So Van asked me, you don't know how I keep going for so long. Dude, this is easy. This is easy. And it gets back to my earlier point about cognitive costs of doing things. When I do the live trading in workshops with 20 or 30 people in them, that goes for 12 hours, and I'm on constantly talking through every trade. So one of the things that I've learned to do is how to use the principle of Wu Wei, effortless action. You'll see a flashcard. You saw a flashcard on that before. If you can reduce the cognitive cost and get recharged through the activities and build your cardio, whatever the equivalent of that is for the narratives and the discussion. So part of that comes from trusting in that inner narrative to let the truth come out and listen to the words as I'm saying them, and if you can try to picture that connection, you're just kind of in the conduit of it. Like the Grateful Dead would play for hours. Well, how could they drum for that many hours? How can African drummers just keep going? Because the act of drumming, in my case, the act of teaching, is a reinforcing feedback loop. So you get stronger the more you drum, and the more I teach, the more energy I get. And this is one of the ways that I can recharge. And so when I go through my prep for all this in the day, I started, for Eugene's benefit, those were all those little 9-inch by 12-inch elementary school lap boards for little kiddies with their whiteboards and medium point markers. But it just felt proper to let those ideas out of my head and onto the screen. Now that I feel like I'm satisfied with the way they sounded in my ear, now I can have those chunks and label them, and that becomes something that can be leveraged. Teach once, use many. And then the community of practice will help me get better at the message and the insights. And your questions generate energy for me to try to answer better or to explore it from a different angle. And so we all get better through that co-creative collaborative learning process, that agreement between teacher and student. Each is a teacher of the other, each is a student of the other, and we agree to get better through our mutually supportive effort. When you get a classroom of Army officers or traders that are kind of all locked into that, just get out of the way. And here we go. So, as my daughter would say, let's go. It's 10:30. You got work to do. Try to get me those things by, I want to say by like 4 o'clock tomorrow. And if you don't have time to do the frames, or you don't know how to do the frames, or don't feel confident sharing it, that's fine. Just put the symbols in that you want to commit to, knowing already that I'm going to do EWZ, HD, Microsoft, a bunch of them. I will tell you, the first one feels like it's hard. The second time is actually harder because you learn so much the first time. It's actually the third one gets easier, and everyone after that, it gets easier. So the first one is kind of the breakthrough. The second one is actually the hardest, the second step. And then 2 steps is a line, and that's a momentum, and you have a direction and an azimuth, and everything after that is just steering it. Add coal to the fire, put power to the wheels. Let's go. So thanks for hanging in there, guys. Eugene, let's reduce waste. The word for that in Japanese is muda. Use everything. Eat the whole animal. Waste nothing. That's how you respect the gift of life. Waste nothing. Do our best to do that. So let's keep going. And here we go. Thanks for your kind attention, guys. I'll get this posted tonight.